Welcome to In-Depth, a show that looks at mining developments in North and South America. Denver-based Thompson Creek Metals has announced plans to buy Canadian junior Terrane Metals. Lizo Hill, our deputy editor in North America, joins me to discuss this development. Lizo, could you please run through the highlights of this transaction?
Sure, Martin. Well, essentially, Thompson Creek Metals, that's a molybdenum producer, has agreed to buy, as you said, Vancouver-based Terrane Metals. The transaction's going to be made up of cash and shares. At the time that it was announced, it was worth about 650 million Canadian dollars. So Thompson Creek is at the moment a pure molybdenum producer. Molybdenum is used to strengthen steel in applications like oil and gas pipelines. The company's got one molybdenum mine 100% owned down in Idaho, and a second operation, it owns 75%, the rest is owned by the Sojus Corporation, and that's up in British Columbia in Canada. It's also got a metallurgical facility in Pennsylvania. So what's it getting with Terrane Metals? The big ticket item is Terrane's Mount Milligan project. It's a copper and gold project up in British Columbia, so it's kind of in the vicinity of Thompson Creek's Endako mine. Terrane has also got a couple of other projects. There's an earlier stage project, a copper and molybdenum called the Berg project, and then also a handful of other even earlier stage exploration assets. Terrane's board has unanimously approved the transaction, and then all that remains is that obviously the regulatory approvals and Terrane's shareholders need to give a 2/3 approval vote to the transaction. Now that shouldn't be too hard, because their biggest shareholder with 58% of the voting equity is actually Goldcorp. That's Canada's second biggest gold producer, and in fact the second biggest gold producer in the world by market capitalization. And Goldcorp has agreed to support the transaction.
Would you say that the announcement by Thompson Creek came as a surprise to the market?
I think the specific transaction might have caught some people off guard. But Thompson Creek has definitely been very clear in signaling its intentions to go and make an acquisition. In fact, CEO Kevin Lockery, it's almost become a bit of a tradition in his quarterly analysts conference calls when they discuss their results. Every quarter, Mr. Lockery will say the company is still looking for acquisitions, and in fact, they've actually gathered quite a nice little pot of cash that they want to go out and use for growth. And so then one or other analyst would ask him, well, how long are you going to keep looking for acquisitions? How long is it going to take until you give up and maybe consider using some of that cash to return to shareholders, maybe a dividend or share buyback? And Kevin Lockery will say, well, actually, we're still looking, we still believe that there are opportunities out there, and this would just go on and on. So I think everyone's quite glad that that's over with now. The company is diversifying. As I said, Mount Milligan is copper and gold, so it's diversifying its commodity portfolio. But even that, Thompson Creek had signaled that it was prepared to look at copper. Obviously, the molybdenum opportunities are limited compared with opportunities in, say, base metals like copper. In fact, most of the molybdenum in the world is actually produced together with copper as a byproduct or in copper mines. So he had signaled that the company would look at those opportunities. As far as the gold is concerned from Mount Milligan, Thompson Creek is really saying that it still sees itself, what it's going to see itself is as a diversified base metals producer. Really just looking at the gold as a byproduct that will help it produce the copper at Mount Milligan more cheaply. So obviously it will depend on the analysts and investors whether they decide to view and value the company in the same way. As far as Terrane is concerned, the company, as I said, it's got this advanced project, Mount Milligan. It's essentially permitted. I think there's one more permit that still needs to come along. It's done all the studies and really more or less ready to go ahead with construction. So the company, Goldcorp, the biggest shareholder in the company, they actually had an opportunity or an option to transfer or to swap their shareholding in Terrane into a joint venture ownerships directly into Mount Milligan. But earlier this year, Goldcorp said no, it was going to let that option expire. So once Terrane knew that that was the decision that Goldcorp had made, because that obviously, if they decided to come in and participate directly in the project, that would have helped significantly with with the financing for the mine. I think they estimate that it's probably going to need another $900 million or so to complete construction. And once they knew that Goldcorp wasn't coming in, Terrane then went out and started looking at what its financing options would be. So I think everyone knew, or people suspected, there was some sort of transaction in the offing for Terrane, but this just turned out to be what they opted for.
And how soon are we going to see production coming from the Mount Milligan project?
Well, as I said, it's essentially permitted. They've done all the studies. They've done everything that's necessary. It's a good size project. The estimated production is 81 million pounds of copper and almost 200,000 ounces of gold a year for a mine life of 22 years. At the moment, production is forecast to start in 2013. The company's actually already started with road construction. They're going to be doing site clearing and site preparation over the rest of this year, and then with construction expected to start in earnest in the spring of 2011.
Oh, thank you, Lizzo. That's the show for today. Join us again next week for more news and insight on mining in the Americas. I'm Martin Joaquin in Johannesburg.